Hello everyone and welcome to Muddy Beards 4x4. I am Robbie and today we are finally back in the shop working on the 1-ton swap on the TrailPlug, my 1999 Jeep Cherokee XJ. Now today I'm really looking to kind of button up the rear end of this vehicle, and that means we got to do a little sheet metal and body work. Now if you've been following this build from the beginning, 2 years now and counting, then you know I cut out this rear quarter panel in order to prep to fit some big 40-inch tires without having to jack this thing up to the moon. I wanted to gain a lot of clearance in the body here, but also I knew I wanted to convert this thing to a rear 4-link, and so I wanted to make room for a coil or shock tower to go up through where the rear wheel well was. So I went to cutting, and I may have got a little overzealous on the amount that I have cut out, but either way, I need to set out to rebuild this entire rear quarter panel, remake the wheel well in order to keep all that water and mud out, and of course exhaust fumes, but also to add structure back to this unibody vehicle and to simply make this thing just look better. So we got a lot of work ahead of us. Better get started. All right, to begin our project here, as you can see, I have already rebuilt this wheel well here on the passenger side. So I have a little bit of a game plan on what I'm going to do for this video. And I am not a sheet metal guy. I don't have any fancy tools. In fact, I hated doing this. This is not my forte. And so really this video is just going to be kind of me, a guy in the garage just figuring out how to do this. So, but first off, what you want to do is you want to start off with a template. Now you know you're doing it right when your template for that side, for the other side, works exactly right for this side. So you know I'm doing something right. But really, all I did is I just took a giant piece of cardboard and I taped it across the opening of the wheel well here. And what I did was I taped it across and then I just drew it out from the inside and then just cut out this template. So as you can see, it's basically just a template of the opening of that wheel well. And this will be my inner piece, and this will start as like the foundation for all the other pieces, and it fits in there, just right with the same exact shape of the opening of the wheel well here of the quarter panel. And so it makes it pretty easy that I can limit the amount of bending I'm going to have to do, welding, all that stuff. So I'm going to do this in pieces. And so once I have this piece in place, then I can do one that can just go straight across the top. I can do a cap up here on the front. And then really the only real tricky part is the piece that's going to end up going here and following this contour. We are going to have to bend and manipulate the sheet metal for that part. And we are going to also have to get rid of this a little bit too, which I did on this side, but I'll show you that in this project. Now, we are also going to have to notch this. So I have this support tube that goes across my shock towers, and so that was one of the challenges that we're going to have to do with these pieces is make sure we notch, because we can't fully enclose this. We're going to have to put just those notches, the openings to go around this support tube here. Now on this side, you can see how it goes through. We do have a little bit of an opening. I'm going to have to try to figure out some way to seal that all the way up. I mean, I don't know if there's that double-sided sticky foam or maybe some like rubber from like a, for seals or something that I can put on there, but I will cross that road when I get there. But now that we have this template and it appears it's going to work for this side as well, we can go over to the sheet metal and cut it out. All right, what we are working with here is a sheet of 20 gauge sheet metal. Now, I like 20 gauge because it is thick enough that it is not an absolute bear to weld to when you're using a really thin diameter wire and really low settings on your welder, but it's also thin enough that it's easy to manipulate, and so when I'm going to have to make some curves and stuff here, it's not too challenging to do that. So pretty simple. I'm just going to lay out my template here, trace it out with a Sharpie or a pen or something, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut it out using my Yes Welder plasma cutter. And just by the way, if you are one of those guys who is still using an angle grinder to cut out all your products, this is a real game changer. Ever since I got this, it speeds up your projects a lot. I still like the angle grinder and I still use it for a lot of the thinner stuff or smaller projects, but you got to get yourself one of these one of these plasma cutters, and the Yes Welder one is very affordable and perfect for a hobbyist. In fact, if you want to get one, I will leave a link in the description below, and if you use our coupon code, you can even get 10% off your welder or plasma cutter purchase, and it helps support our channel. So let's get this thing cut out. Okay, check it out. I got my piece cut out here, and if you notice, this thing now perfectly follows the same contour as the cut from the outer wheel well. So this piece should now act essentially as my guide for my other templates here. Now, the nice thing about doing it this way is that all of my templates do line up from the other side, and I shouldn't have to do too much, bending work with the sheet metal. So this piece is simply going to go straight across the top and sort of box in just the upper part of the wheel well. And then for the front, I'm going to be using this piece. So this is going to follow the contour here and kind of fits up into there like this when this is pushed down all together, meeting the line of this wheel well. That doesn't look the best because it sort of boxes it in, but the only other alternative would have been to cut all of this out and completely redo it. And I just didn't want to do that, and it doesn't look too bad. And then lastly, though, is this piece. So I got 3 more pieces to finish this up, and this will be the only piece that does require some bending. As you see, it's going to fit up here like this, and you should be able to push it up against here, and then it'll meet with the upper part up here and then follow the contour, that inner piece. But there is one issue here, and that is this whole piece of structure right in here. So this is all part of that lift gate structure, or maybe the D pillar, and it's preventing me from just going straight in and meeting with my inner piece here. So I am going to have to cut this out, probably along the top line here, and then down here like this. And then what I'll go ahead and do is just cap it off and weld a piece of sheet metal over the top to put the structure back on it. But what it does here, as you can see on the other side, it's a little dark, but it gives me that nice flat surface so I can run this inner piece straight through without that interference, and I still have the hole and everything for running my wires through. So before I go ahead and cut out these templates out of sheet metal, I'm going to go ahead and get this cut out, capped off, to make sure that everything fits like it's supposed to, and we can move on to the next part of this project. Well, check this out. I just have a quick trick for working with this sheet metal that could save you a lot of time and headache that I've learned while doing all of this sheet metal work here. And actually my buddy Dan taught me this, and it seems like a no-brainer, but when you are doing a butt weld with two very thin pieces of material, this joint right here is very easy to blow through because of that gap. And so the simple solution is just to take a small strip of thicker material and lay it behind your two pieces of sheet metal. You might want to do a little bit thicker than that. But what that will do is that thicker material will absorb the heat of the weld and allow you to push that weld pool onto the thinner pieces without blowing through. Not to mention, it's going to make that whole joint a lot stronger. Now, if you do it on a joint or a body panel like I did here on this D-pillar, you can put it behind those two pieces like I did straight down here. Weld it up. It's going to make it a lot easier to weld, and it's going to add a lot more strength and rigidity to, you know, that body panel. And so that's just a simple little trick that I've learned while doing all this work that can save you a lot of headache, because this very thin stuff is very easy to blow through. Well, check it out. I managed to get this rear piece all bent up, fitted, and tack welded into place. And it really wasn't too big of a challenge, just a little bit of muscle power and some strategically placed clamps. And we got this thing fitted up and tack welded up pretty easily, which brings me to my second tip that I have learned while doing all this sheet metal work, and that is the use of these tools right here. These are I believe they're called a butt welding clamp tool, and they're super cheap, something you can find at like Harbor Freight. But these could save you a lot of time. And essentially what they do is slide into your two panels or your two pieces of material. You tighten down this wing nut, and this little bar draws up the two panels and holds them up nice and level and plumb, while also, of course, holding them into place so that you can get this thing tack welded. And so these things saved me a lot of time by holding together these two panels right here. Now, as far as along the fender well here, the outer quarter panel, I just simply used some just carpentry clamps and just kind of clamped it into place and just slowly added some tack welds all the way up. And that went together pretty easily. So I just have one more panel to cut out and fit, and that's this front panel, which will mean this thing will now be fully boxed into place, and we will have an entire inner fender or wheel well again. And then I, of course, am going to have to do a ton of tack welding to completely weld up this new inner fender liner. So let's get to work. So as I am welding and welding and welding, I have come upon a third opportunity to share with you a quick tip that I have learned while working with all this sheet metal. So if you can see here, I have a pretty decent little gap in between my panels. Now this is totally my fault because when I cut out this floor pan originally, I got a little hackzilla and I didn't cut it super straight, and so now I got this straight body panel here and it's giving me a few gaps. Now if this was a little bit thicker material, I would just simply build up a weld and just kind of fill in that gap, but with this thinner sheet metal, that is a challenge to do. So what I have been doing is taking a piece of welding wire. So ideally get the thicker stuff, like this is some 035, and I've just been wrapping it up tight into like these little, I guess these little threads here. And I'm not saying this is the right way to do things, but it seems to be working. And you can just kind of jam that down into the gap. And then what that does is give you a little bit of material to weld to, and it helps melt, you know, this welding wire, and it allows me to fill in that gap a lot easier on this sheet metal. So that's a pretty decent little tip. Turns out with some pretty ugly welds, but you can always grind this down and re-weld it if you have to. But anyway, another tip that might save you a little bit of time. Well, check it out, everyone. After tons of welding and grinding, our final product is starting to take shape. We now have a new wheel well, rebuilt quarter panel, whatever you want to call it, and things are looking pretty good. Before we get to painting, I am going to go ahead and add in some body filler or some Bondo here along all of the seams. Now for a couple of reasons. Number one, I have some low spots and stuff from the welding and the grinding process, and might even be a few little pinholes here and there, and this is going to of course help fill all that in and just add a little bit of reinforcement to make sure that these panels do not separate. But beyond that, also I'll be able to reshape, make sure I got nice lines and edges, by sanding down after I go ahead and put this on all the seams. And even though this is a wheeler and it's going to get spray painted with, truck bed liner, which is pretty forgiving, I still want it to look decent. So we're going to go ahead, spread some Bondo, allow that to dry, get everything nice and sanded out and looking flat, and we'll get to paint. Well, lots of sanding on this body filler, and I got this thing looking pretty good, or at least good enough for me. And I was really able to get a lot of these body lines nice and smooth. You can see here on the inside, this is looking nice and smooth. Pretty good here. And I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out, and I think it's going to be good enough for me. So I'm going to go ahead and spray this thing, but there's one more tip that I thought I'd share with you before I get started here, is because when I did this other side here, it's kind of getting dark in my garage, sorry, but really frustrating thing is you spray over this, no matter how smooth you get this, but if you spray over that Bondo with just paint, you're going to see like a clear difference. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily the texture or it's because this Bondo tends to absorb or suck up that paint a little bit, but just a quick tip, and it's probably a good tip whenever you're
painting anything like this is to go ahead and spray it with some primer and stuff as well. I like to use like a buildable or a sandable primer. And I can put a layer on top of this and then go back in and scuff out even some other high spots that I might see. And then when I go and throw the truck bed liner, which I'm going to use, which is pretty forgiving paint anyway, over the top, it's going to really hide the rest of those imperfections. And for a wheeler, I think that is going to turn out just fine. Well, all right, we have cut out the sheet metal, fitted the panels, got everything all welded up, ground down, sealed, sanded, primered, and painted, and I now have a completed new inner wheel well and rebuilt rear quarter panel. And you know what? I think it turned out good. You know, I have quite a bit of time wrapped up into this project, and you know, it's not perfect. Some of my Bondo work and body work is certainly not the best, but you know what? The thing is this is going to achieve the goal that I wanted it to. This is going to keep out, you know, most of the mud and dirt and water and exhaust fumes while still sealing it up and giving me plenty of room to fit in those big 40-inch tires. And you know, I actually think this looks great. I love how this turned out. You know, giving that little bit of that, you know, that wheel well arch, and gives it, allows it to keep some of that, you know, I think just original Cherokee body lines just a bit. I really debated just cutting straight back and doing more like a true comp cut, but I am digging this, and there's still plenty of room here to fit those 40s while achieving what I wanted to achieve. Well, thank you for tuning into this video here on Muddy Beers 4x4. I hope you enjoyed the content and that it helped you out a little bit or maybe inspired you for a future project. You know, if you have any tips, tricks, or anything like that about body work or sheet metal work like the stuff we were doing here, include them down in the comments. I'd love to hear from your knowledge base and from what you all know that might help somebody else on a project like this, because it's hard work. This is not the easiest stuff to do, and for me it's not the most fun, but we got it done, we got it achieved, and that means I can now continue to move forward on this 1-ton build that I know has taken a long time. But we're getting some stuff done, progress is being made. So make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment down below, subscribe if you are not already, and until next time, we will see you on the trail.